When he closed his eyes during the regression, expecting to find a past life in some ancient time or distant place, what he found instead was a room that existed nowhere and everywhere at once. A vast hall, filled with light and presence, with thousands of souls gathered together like students in the most important classroom in the universe, and standing at the front, radiating wisdom older than time itself, was a being he recognized instantly even though he had never seen them before. His teacher, his guide, the one who had been with him through every lifetime, waiting for him to finally remember. His name was Daniel, and he had come to the regression therapist with a specific question. Not about a relationship problem, or a phobia, or unexplained pain. His question was simpler and more profound. He wanted to know why he was here, what his soul's purpose was, what he was supposed to be learning or accomplishing in this lifetime. He was 32 years old and felt like he was wandering through life without a map, doing things that seemed meaningless, unable to shake the feeling that he was supposed to be doing something else, but having no idea what that something else might be. The therapist, a woman named Dr. Patricia, who had been doing this work for over 25 years, explained that the best way to understand a soul's purpose was often to go not to a past life but to the space between lives, the realm where souls existed before incarnating and after dying, the place where lessons were planned and contracts were made and purposes were chosen. If Daniel wanted to know why he was here, that's where they needed to look. Daniel had been skeptical at first. He wasn't sure he believed in souls or past lives or any of it, but he was desperate for answers, tired of feeling lost, willing to try anything that might give him some clarity about his life's direction. So he had made the appointment, driven to Dr. Patricia's office on a gray Saturday morning, and now here he was, lying on a comfortable recliner, about to explore realms his logical mind insisted didn't exist. Dr. Patricia's voice was gentle but authoritative as she guided him into trance. She used breathing techniques first, having him inhale slowly and exhale even more slowly, releasing tension with each breath. Then she guided him through progressive relaxation, systematically releasing every muscle in his body until he felt like he was floating. His awareness shifted from the external world to a vast internal landscape. Time became irrelevant. The room around him faded into background noise. Dr. Patricia asked him to imagine himself surrounded by protective light, to call in his guides and higher self, to set the intention to access only information that served his highest good. Then she began counting him down, deeper and deeper into trance, suggesting that when he reached the deepest level, he would find himself in the space between lives, in the realm where his soul existed before choosing to incarnate as Daniel. He felt himself descending through layers of consciousness, through memories of this lifetime, through the moment of birth, through the darkness before birth, and then further still into something vast and luminous. And when Dr. Patricia finished counting and told him to open his awareness to where he was, what he saw took his breath away. He was in a hall, but calling it a hall didn't do it justice. It was immense, stretching in every direction further than he could perceive, with walls that seemed to be made of crystallized light that shifted through colors he had never seen before. The ceiling, if it could be called a ceiling, seemed to open directly into space, into stars and galaxies and the infinite cosmos. And everywhere, everywhere, were souls. Not people with bhaftas. These were beings of pure light and energy, each one a distinct presence with their own unique frequency and color. There were thousands of them, maybe tens of thousands, all gathered in this vast space. Some were clustered in small groups, engaged in what looked like intense conversations or shared experiences. Others sat alone in meditation or contemplation, and at the front of this massive hall, on what could only be described as a raised platform, were beings who radiated even more intensely than the others, teachers, guides, the ones who oversaw this gathering. Dr. Patricia asked Daniel to describe what he was seeing. He struggled to find words adequate to convey the magnificence of it. He tried to explain the scale, the light, the presence of so many souls in one place. And as he spoke, he began to understand what he was witnessing. This was a gathering of souls who were preparing to incarnate on Earth during a specific time period. His time period, the late 20th and early 21st centuries. He understood this not through words or explanation but through direct knowing, the way you know things in dreams without needing to be told. All of these souls had agreed to incarnate on Earth during a critical period in human history, a time of massive transition, when humanity would either destroy itself or evolve to a higher level of consciousness. and every soul here had volunteered to be part of that shift, to help tip the balance toward awakening rather than destruction. Dr. Patricia asked if Daniel could identify himself among all these souls. He looked and found himself, or rather, found the soul that would eventually become Daniel. He was sitting in a group of about 20 other souls, his soul family, the ones he had incarnated with many times before. They were discussing their upcoming lives, sharing what roles each would play, making agreements about how they would support each other. One soul in the group would incarnate as his older sister, someone who would challenge him and frustrate him but ultimately push him toward growth. Another would become his best friend in high school, someone who would introduce him to ideas and experiences that would crack open his limited worldview. Another would be a teacher he would meet in his 30s who would help him remember his purpose. They were planning it all out, choreographing their lives like an elaborate dance where every step had meaning, but Daniel's soul seemed uncertain, hesitant. He was agreeing to the plan but without the enthusiasm the others showed, and Dr. Patricia, sensing this, asked why. What was Daniel's soul afraid of? And the answer came flooding through. He was afraid of forgetting, afraid that once he incarnated, once the veil of forgetting descended, he would get lost in the physical world and never remember why he came. That he would waste his life on meaningless pursuits, would never wake up to his purpose, would return to this realm, having accomplished nothing he set out to do. One of the elder guides approached Daniel's soul, a being of such profound wisdom and compassion that Daniel felt like crying just from being in their presence. The guide communicated not in words but in direct transmission of understanding. They explained that yes, the forgetting would happen. It was part of the design. Daniel would be born not remembering any of this, would grow up thinking he was just a regular human with no special purpose or cosmic mission. But the forgetting wasn't a flaw in the system. It was necessary. The guide showed Daniel why. If souls incarnated with full memory of who they were and what they came to do, the experience would be hollow. There would be no free will, no authentic choice, no real growth. The whole point of physical incarnation was to forget and then remember, to be lost and then find the way home, to believe you were separate and then discover you were always connected. The journey from forgetting to remembering was where the real transformation happened. The guide also assured Daniel's soul that help would be provided. There would be signs and synchronicities. There would be moments when the veil thinned and glimpses of truth broke through. There would be people and books and experiences specifically placed in his path to trigger remembering. And most importantly, the guide themselves would be with him constantly, an invisible presence watching over him, sending guidance through intuition and dreams, waiting for the moment when Daniel was ready to hear their voice. Daniel's soul asked how he would know when that moment arrived. How would he know when it was time to remember? The guide explained that there would be a feeling, a deep dissatisfaction with surface-level living, a hunger for something more meaningful. That feeling would grow until it became unbearable, until Daniel had no choice but to start seeking answers. And that seeking would eventually lead him here, to this regression session, to this moment of remembering. The scene shifted. Daniel found himself in a different part of the vast hall, in what felt like a more intimate space. He was alone with his primary guide, the being who had been with him through countless incarnations. The guide had no fixed form but appeared as pure light and presence. Though Daniel sensed masculine energy and felt compelled to think of the guide as he, the guide showed Daniel a review of his past lives. Not every lifetime but key ones that were relevant to his current incarnation. There had been a life as a monk in medieval Tibet, devoted to meditation and the study of consciousness. That lifetime had given Daniel's soul deep spiritual understanding, but had been isolated, removed from the messy reality of human relationships and physical challenges. So another lifetime had been chosen as a warrior, fully engaged in the physical world, experiencing violence and passion and the full range of human emotions. That lifetime had grounded the spiritual knowledge in bodily experience. There had been a lifetime as a mother with many children, learning about nurturing and sacrifice and unconditional love. A lifetime as a musician, exploring creativity and the ways art could touch souls and open hearts. A lifetime as a farmer, connecting with the earth and learning about patience and natural cycles. Each lifetime had taught something specific, had developed particular qualities or resolved particular karmic patterns. And all of it was leading toward this current life as Daniel. The guide explained that Daniel's soul was what might be called an old soul, not better than other souls, but more experienced. He had lived many lifetimes on Earth and on other planets, in other dimensions. He had accumulated vast knowledge and wisdom. And in this current life, his purpose was not primarily to learn new lessons, but to remember what he already knew and share it. He was here as a teacher, a wayshower, someone who could help others wake up and remember their own true nature. But the guide cautioned that this wouldn't look the way Daniel might expect. He wouldn't necessarily be a formal teacher with students and a classroom. His teaching might happen through casual conversations, through the energy he carried, through the example of how he lived his life. Sometimes the most powerful teaching happens silently, through presence rather than words. Daniel's soul had agreed to be a beacon, someone who held a higher frequency that others could attune to, helping them raise their own vibration simply by being near him. The guide also showed Daniel the specific challenges he had chosen for this lifetime. He had selected parents who were emotionally unavailable, not because he needed to suffer, but because that wound would crack open his heart and make him more compassionate toward others who felt unloved. He had chosen to struggle financially in his 20s and early 30s, not as punishment, but to help him understand that security didn't come from external circumstances, but from inner connection to Source. He had chosen to feel lost and purposeless for years, specifically so that when he finally remembered his purpose, the contrast would be stark, and the remembering would be powerful enough to anchor him firmly in his mission. Dr. Patricia asked if the guide had a message for Daniel, something specific he needed to hear. The guide moved closer, and Daniel felt enveloped in a love so vast and unconditional that it made everything else in his life seem trivial by comparison. The guide transmitted a complex message that took several minutes for Daniel to translate into words. But the essence was this: Daniel was exactly where he needed to be. Every experience, even the painful ones, even the years of feeling lost, had been perfect. They had shaped him, prepared him, made him into someone capable of holding the light he came here to anchor. The guide explained that Daniel's real work was about to begin. He was 32, which meant he was entering the phase of life where souls who incarnated for service work typically activated and stepped into their missions. The seeking, the dissatisfaction, the feeling of wasting his life, these were all signs that he was ready. This regression session was the trigger, the moment of remembering that would change everything. But the guide also warned Daniel not to quit his job and radically change his life based on this experience. Dramatic external changes weren't necessary. The shift would happen internally first. He would start seeing his current life through different eyes, would recognize opportunities for service that had always been there but that he hadn't noticed. His job as a social worker, which he had viewed as just a way to pay bills, would reveal itself as perfect positioning for the kind of soul-level helping he came here to do. His relationships, his daily activities, all of it would take on new meaning once he remembered his purpose. The guide showed Daniel one more thing, a vision of his life at age 50, about 18 years in the future. Daniel saw himself as he would be, older but radiating peace and purpose. He was working with people who were going through spiritual awakening, helping them navigate the confusion and fear that often accompanied remembering. He was writing, teaching, holding space for others to discover their own truth. He wasn't famous or wealthy by worldly standards, but he was fulfilled in a way that material success could never provide. He was living his purpose, doing what his soul came here to do. The guide explained that this future wasn't fixed. Daniel had free will. He could choose to ignore what he learned in this session, could go back to his old life and continue feeling lost. But if he chose to honor what he was remembering, if he made small, consistent choices aligned with his purpose, this future would unfold naturally. It wasn't about forcing or striving. It was about allowing, about saying yes to the opportunities that would present themselves, about trusting the unfolding even when it didn't make logical sense. Daniel felt overwhelmed by gratitude for this guide who had been with him through everything, for the opportunity to incarnate on Earth during such a significant time, for the chance to be of service, for this moment of remembering that was illuminating his entire life. He tried to express his thanks, but found he had no words adequate for what he felt. The guide communicated that no words were needed, the gratitude itself was enough. And then the guide reminded him of something crucial. He was never alone, even when he couldn't consciously feel the guide's presence. Even when life felt hard and confusing, the guide was always there, always watching, always sending love and support across the veil between worlds. The scene began to fade. Dr. Patricia's voice was calling him back, gently guiding him toward present awareness. Daniel felt himself rising up through layers of consciousness, leaving the soul gathering hall, moving back toward his body, back toward the present time and place. But he carried the memory with him, carried the feeling of that vast space filled with souls preparing to help humanity awaken, carried the knowledge of his guides' constant presence, carried the understanding of why he was here and what he came to do. When he opened his eyes in Dr. Patricia's office, everything looked different. The room was the same, but his perception had fundamentally shifted. He felt like he had been asleep his whole life and was finally waking up, like he had been playing a role, pretending to be someone he wasn't, and could finally drop the act and be authentic, like he had been searching for something outside himself that had always been inside him. Dr. Patricia gave him time to integrate, to sit with what he had experienced. Then they talked about it, about the soul gathering hall, about his guide, about his purpose. Daniel described everything he had seen and felt, his words tumbling out in a rush of excitement and awe. Dr. Patricia listened with knowing nods, having guided many people to similar experiences. She explained that the soul realm was real, that the gathering hall he had witnessed was a known phenomenon in regression work, that many souls were indeed incarnating now specifically to help with humanity's evolution. She also gave him practical advice for moving forward. She encouraged him to meditate daily, to create space for connection with his guide. She suggested he journal about his experiences and insights, tracking how his understanding evolved. She recommended he be gentle with himself, not expecting to change overnight, but trusting the gradual unfolding of his purpose. And she reminded him that he could return to the soul realm anytime through meditation or future regression sessions. That this was not a one-time experience, but an ongoing relationship with a dimension of reality that existed beyond the physical. In the days and weeks after the regression, Daniel's life transformed. Not externally at first, but internally. He looked at his social work job with new eyes, seeing it as soul work rather than just employment. He recognized that every person he helped, every conversation he had, every moment of compassion he offered was part of his mission. He didn't need a bigger platform or a different career. He needed to bring full presence and consciousness to what he was already doing. He also started noticing the synchronicities his guide had promised. Books appearing at exactly the right moment. Conversations that addressed questions he had been pondering. People entering his life who were also waking up and remembering their purposes. It was like the universe was responding to his remembering, offering confirmation and support, showing him that he was on the right path. He began meditating regularly, and in meditation, he could sometimes sense his guide's presence, could feel that loving support that had been with him all along but that he had never consciously recognized. Sometimes he received guidance, clear knowing about decisions he needed to make or directions he should take. He learned to trust his intuition, understanding now that it was his guide's voice speaking through his own inner wisdom. Daniel also felt a shift in his relationships. Some people drifted away, connections that had been based on his old identity no longer resonating with who he was becoming. But new people arrived, souls who recognized him on a deeper level, who were also remembering their purposes, who could walk alongside him on this path of conscious service. He found his soul family, the ones he had seen in the gathering hall, scattered across his city and his life, each one playing their agreed-upon role perfectly. The vision of his future at 50 became a North Star, something he moved toward with trust and patience. He didn't try to force it or rush it. He simply made choices aligned with his purpose, said yes to opportunities that resonated with his soul, and allowed the path to reveal itself step by step. He started a blog sharing insights about awakening and consciousness. He trained to become a meditation teacher. He volunteered with organizations that aligned with his values. Small steps, but each one moved him closer to that future his guide had shown him. Most importantly, Daniel stopped feeling lost. The existential confusion that had plagued him for years dissolved. He knew why he was here now. He understood that his life had meaning and purpose, that every experience had been part of a larger plan, that he was exactly where he needed to be, doing exactly what he came to do. This knowing brought a peace that didn't depend on external circumstances. Even when life was challenging, even when things didn't go the way he wanted, he maintained an underlying sense of trust and alignment. He thought often about the soul gathering hall, about the thousands of souls who had agreed to incarnate during this pivotal time in human history. He wondered how many of them had remembered their purposes, how many were still lost in the forgetting, and he felt a renewed commitment to his own work of helping others wake up, because that was the whole point, wasn't it? not just his individual awakening, but the collective shift. Every soul who remembered their purpose helped other souls remember theirs. The awakening was spreading like ripples in a pond, each awakened soul creating waves that touched and activated others. Daniel also developed a different relationship with death. Before the regression, death had been his greatest fear, the ultimate unknown that terrified him. But now, having experienced the soul realm, having seen where he existed before birth and where he would return after death, the fear dissolved. Death was just a transition, a return to his true home, a reunion with his guide and his soul family. This understanding freed him to live more fully, to take risks, to be authentic, to stop wasting time on things that didn't matter. Years later, when he did reach his 50s and found himself living almost exactly the life his guide had shown him, he looked back on that regression session as the turning point, the moment when everything changed, when he stopped wandering and started walking a clear path, when he stopped feeling like a random accident in a meaningless universe and started knowing himself as an eternal soul on a purposeful mission, when he stopped feeling alone and started feeling constantly accompanied by love and guidance, and he carried the memory of that vast hall filled with souls, all of them volunteers, all of them here to help humanity evolve, all of them part of something so much bigger than any individual life. Whenever he felt discouraged or doubted his purpose, he remembered that gathering, remembered the collective commitment, remembered that he was part of a cosmic team working together toward the awakening of an entire species. And that memory gave him strength to continue, to keep showing up, to keep holding his piece of the light until the work was done and it was time to return home. Subscribe to explore the realms where souls gather before choosing to be born.